The history of any country is always bound with unrevealed secrets, sacred places and riddles which scientists have been trying to solve for decades. Kazakhstan is an ancient land. Its history keeps a lot of glorious names, events and facts, some of which are still covered with myths and legends. The Time Puzzle crew tries to understand the intricacies of ancient and modern mysteries of history, traveling around the country and visiting its most amazing corners. Meeting the supernatural, mysterious shamanship. In the middle of the night, a little boy rushed into the parents' bedroom. He jumped into their bed and nuzzled under the blanket. A man and a woman woke up at once. Becoming worried, they started to ask their son about what had happened. The terrified boy pointed at the door and told them that a huge black monster was sitting on the ceiling of his room. The mother began to hush her child, while the father went to check the child's room. Of course, he didn't find anything there. Barely calming their child, they lulled him into sleep. In the morning, they found out that their child had a fever and he couldn't wake up, but he was screaming, tossing and turning. A doctor's visit and medicine didn't take any effect. Then the mother called her grandma. The grandma arrived with a strange person. He closed up to the bed, looked at the child, whispered something, turned to the parents standing behind him. His face was awry from fear. The man asked only one question. Have your son said anything about the black monster? Watch right now. Scary characters of Kazakh myths. They can be met even these days. So when poplars, birches and oaks are waving, people tell that it's the Tuglas are coming. They march in lines, lots and lots of Tuglas. Their dik is totally incomprehensible substance. It lives on the dome of a yurt beside the tundik. Shamans and Baksi, gods at the edge of the three worlds. Now I'm going to a man who, according to his assurances, knows how to see and hear spirits and also knows how to influence them. I go to the shaman. How realistic are parallel worlds? We have the myth that everything can be explained rationally. As a scientist, I tell you that you do not always have to try to even do it. Why, in the opinion of many researchers, myths and legends are not just beautiful and scary stories, but a guide to how to behave if you face supernatural phenomena. Watch all these and even more in this episode of the Time Puzzle. An important place in folklore and the life of nomads was occupied by shamans or Baksi. People attributed them with the abilities to communicate with spirits or other mythical beings, and also to control them. My name is Andrei Slozhin, it is the Time Puzzle, and today we're going to explore a lot of interesting and mysterious things. There are many inexplicable stories in the world connected with creatures that cannot be filmed in the photo and video and which appear suddenly and frighten people. They are found in forests, steppes and mountains. They break into houses. Scientists tirelessly deny the possibility of their existence. Psychologists try to explain everything with the help of the conscious and the unconscious. And people continue to tell terrible and wonderful stories of unknown and incomprehensible creatures. Such stories are far from new. Even our distant ancestors began to inhabit the surrounding world with various beings, both visible and not, good and evil. Mythology absorbed all of this. The spirits of the forest and nature, shaitans, jinns and many other mythological creatures. The Swedes, for example, had beings like elves. They were invisible, lived in the forest, and helped people who cared for the forest. Did not kill animals, did not cut down the young trees. The Slavic peoples have Goblin, also the owner of the forest. He could make a traveler get lost if a traveler came to his possession with black thoughts. There is a similar being in Kazakh myths too. Kairat Janabayev, the candidate of philological sciences and poet translator who has been studying Kazakh mythology for many years, told us what kind of creation was that. The Tuglars, they can be met in forests and they are also invisible. So when poplars, birches and oaks are waving, people tell that it's the Tuglars coming. They march in lines, lots and lots of Tuglars. They catch those people who violate the nature of the forest. So when some people bring any damage to forest, Tuglars appear and they start to chase those troublemakers. Historians, anthropologists and other scientists continue to study mythology as a part of the cultural heritage. But these are those people who consider all these fabulous creations not imaginary at all, but quite real inhabitants of different worlds, simply inaccessible to our sight and understanding. Now I'm going to a man who, according to his assurances, knows how to see and hear spirits and also knows how to influence them. I'm going to the shaman. All these spirits that we are talking about, or rather starting from these spirits, from the population of these subtle worlds, all the ancient epics, all fairy tales, including the Kazakh ones, take place. And any Turkic and Slavic, pre-Christian and any mythology, it is based precisely on such stories, tales and understandings. There are a lot of spirits, and as we suppose, there are spirits of the terrain. Any terrain has its own guardian spirit. It is believed that places that have a so-called master have a special energy. It depends on the nature of this master. This is either a very beautiful place in which a person feels pacification, peace, or a burst of energy. Or vice versa, the beauty of the landscape seems frightening. It seems as if it presses on an occasional guest, makes you feel fear and decline of spirit. Much depends on what kind of energy the person has. Recently, scientists have begun to actively study a phenomenon such as biofield. The so-called Kirlian method allows you to take photographs where you can see the aura around people, animals and plants. Its color and size tell researchers about the presence of diseases, emotional state and level of energy activity of the subject. However, such knowledge about the aura of man was known from ancient times. For example, the ancient Indian saga believed that the human aura is an energy information field where everything that happens to a person is recorded, and that through these records the person contacts with other worlds. Also, there are some expressions which are the examples of this phenomena. This person is shining from the inside, or his light is extinguished.
Я всегда считал, что нет такого понятия, как злой или плохой человек.
I always believed that there is no such thing as an evil or a bad person. Each of the people is born a baby, an angel. Similarly, spirits cannot be evil or bad, well, in the sense as realized by people. There are such spirits which are called azala. They are not that evil, and they are not bad. Like wolves, right? A flock of wolves. In fact, it's a predator. In fact, it's a killer. And when a wolf attacks a stray sheep and eats it, can it be called evil or bad? It's his nature. It is a predator. It is created by the creator in order to hunt, to track down his prey and feed accordingly. For Baxi and shamans, communication with spirits, demons and angels is part of everyday life. For most, it's pure fantasy and fiction because there is no scientific evidence for the existence of ghosts, witches or devils. But for example, the study of brain biocurrents with the help of electroencephalography was discovered not so long ago. Therefore, it is logical to assume that modern science has not yet approached the point beyond which lies the explanation for such phenomena. The surrounding world for the ancient nomads was full of mysteries and secrets, which required explanations. The change of the seasons, the forces of the elements, sunlight filling with life and warmth, and the darkness and cold of the night after all. Here is a yurt. This is a circle. Incredible things can happen beyond that circle at night. And here they are, these spirits, through the steppe, to the sky, to the polar star. All this is spinning around. That is, this entire demonology, it all triumphs at night. The sun shoots its rays. The demons scatter on ravens along wells, somewhere in dark places, until the sun rises to the zenith. Then the sun goes away and they appear again, the demons. And the demons follow it. That is, this is a whole mythological picture. The sun played a special role in many mythologies and cults. The Aztecs and Mayans considered him their most important god. The sun was respected by the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Slavs, and many other peoples. The daylight always belonged to the highest heavenly world, controlled the middle world, and fought with the lower world. This division of the universe, by the way, is also very common. For example, the ancient nomads also believed that the world consists of three parts. The upper is the sky, good beings live there. The middle world is inhabited by people, and the lower one is underground. It is from there that evil spirits and demons break into our reality. The only ones who could stand on the border of the worlds and resist the influence of dark forces were shamans and Baxi. It was these people who knew how to travel from one reality to another. In order to enter the trance, many Baxi and shamans use rhythmic beats in a tambourine or drum. There are those who do this with the help of a harp. In any case, there is some kind of musical instrument. Remember even the legend about Kit, when he was sitting and playing the corbeas that stopped time and even death.
Психическое состояние непосредственно шамана.
The mental state of the shaman himself, he undergoes powerful changes. You can even say certain regenerations. And many things can be done in these states because the line is very thin. And I personally explain this by traveling to, for example, the lower world. The psyche of not every person can cope with pictures that can appear to the eye. And in order to carry out certain ritual practices, many shamans in ancient times used the artesh or rasha. Now we call it a juniper. By the way, juniper or racha is very common in many regions of the world, including Kazakhstan. It is especially often found in the foothills. Decoctions of juniper berries are widely used not only in shaman practices but also in folk medicine. And tourists who visit our mountains like to brew juniper tea on the stalls.
В настоящее время все шаманы.
Now all shamans, and not only shamans, begin their ritual practices with fumigation. For fumigation, Kazakhs, for example, in our time, like to burn Adira span. But my personal preference is juniper, because the smoke of this plant is very good and excites evil spirits very well. And at the same time, the official science considers juniper is an easy form of hallucinogen. That is, in antiquity, when shamans lived in yurts, they fumigated the yurt tightly where they did their work. And accordingly, breathing in the smoke of this plant, as scientists now call the mild form of a hallucinogen, the very change in the state of consciousness occurred in which the shaman practiced this or that practice. These could be rites for expelling evil spirits or treating sickness, causing rain or searching for the missing person. In any case, before proceeding to this or that ritual, the shaman had to be prepared. After all, he did not know what he could face on the other side of reality.
Халат точно так же, как и головной убор.
Dressing gown, just like the headdress, just like attributes such as a dayak, stick that is behind me, or dungur, a shamanic tambourine. All these are shaman attributes, elements that have a deeper meaning than it seems at first glance. Spirit defender. The spirit of this attribute begins to work closely with the shaman. Hanging robes, they are called the Jlan Eren or Chlan Eren. That is, the Eren is the home of the spirit, a certain amulet, a talisman all in one. And generally, the whole robe, it includes cosmology and mythology, and the presence of spirits, and the division into 4 parts of the world. Speaking of the cross, it represents the division into the upper, middle, and lower world, respectively. The world tree is one of the most important things in the mythology of many peoples. It is a part of Kazakh mythology too. So its roots are in the lower world, the trunk passes through the middle, and the crown extends into the upper of the worlds. Thus, it unites the universe. Mentions of the world tree can be met in the Slavic mythology, in the Scandinavian myths, in the Iranian myths, and even in some religions. A characteristic common feature of all these stories is a bird that lives in its branches. In Turkic mythology, this tree was called Baytirek. Unlike the Scandinavian myths, where this tree was ash, the Kazakh's tree was poplar. Samruk bird, the symbol of the sun, laid an egg on its branches. This sun was swallowed every year by the dragon Aida Khan. The bird symbolized the good and the dragon the dark forces. According to the beliefs, these 2 creatures offered their patronage and strength to the man who saw them. It remained only to make a choice which side to accept, good or evil. I think that for the most part, real native folk tales or myths, they are quite tough. True myths, especially ancient myths, they did not try to embellish or smooth out some contradictions. That is, they told everything just the way it was. And it is very important to understand that this is not a matter of the reality in which we are now. This is a psychic reality. It lives by completely different laws, by other rules. And for example, in our reality, in our dimension, if we cut off someone's head, this person is done, that's all. And in a reality of a myth or a fairy tale, it is quite possible that this is just the beginning of something new. That is, they cut off the head, old ideas, old conceptions, and so on. Indeed, in many tales and myths, there are plots where the protagonist perishes and then miraculously returns to life with the help of living and dead water or some other magical attributes or assistance. The battle with death is one of the tasks of modern shamans and Baxi. That's what Komagan Tobet Kam told us about his experience of such a dangerous duel. One woman had a problem with her son. He was ill, but the problem was huge. It was a matter of life and death. So I had to conduct ritual practice. This is not so much a cure, but a rite. It was called a rite of, how to put it right, a rite for deceiving death itself. There is an old saying, you cannot escape your fate. You cannot escape from death, but it can only be delayed. It is quite possible for a certain period. So we conducted a ritual of deceiving the death, so that death would be deceived. For example, it came for Sarik, Berik, Nikolai, and did not find this man. And it leaves empty-handed. The fear of death is the most intense fear of any person. And the image of death, in fact, as I said again, in fact it is not an anthropomorphic creature in a black robe holding a scythe. It's much more terrible, much more aggressive. And at this moment, it is necessary to be very, very attentive, cautious. Because Kam, or shaman, who is conducting this rite, he is like being on a thin ice. By entering a special state, a shaman can not only cure a person, but also drive away all evil spirits that live around him. For example, in Kazakh mythology, there is one creature that lives above the dome of the yurt and harms people. There is such a mythical character in Kazakh mythology, a Bedik. Bedik is a completely incomprehensible creature. It lives on the dome of the yurt, behind the tunduk. Therefore, the tunduk must be closed for the night, otherwise the Bedik will enter the yurt, go down, and enter a person's dreams and harm a person. And it can even take small children away. Also, it can make people ill and take a person's soul away. Then we cannot help recalling the story of a little boy who was frightened at night by a black monster on the ceiling. Perhaps it happened because of the vivid imagination of a child, so the usual shadow became a terrible monster. But according to some researchers and esotericists, children are not just dreamers. Their psyche is much more sensitive to the subtle worlds and their manifestations. Who knows what is reality behind children's nightmares? Bedik or Baduk is an ancient creature of Kazakh mythology. In modern myth-making, there is a similar character. In 2014, a horror film Babadook was released, which was shot by Australian director Jennifer Kent. Her monster Babadook is very similar to the Kazakh Baduk and also spoils the life of a child. I wonder, did the Australian director know this Kazakh legend, or they do have similar creature in Australia? In general, the horror is very popular both in literature and cinema. But there is one most popular equivalent, the Belichka. Tales of meetings with boogies, ghosts, poltergeists and other supernatural creatures are considered one of the forms of mythology. In Kazakhstan, especially in southern Kazakhstan, there are quite a lot of such Belichkas. But you know, I'll tell you, I don't have reasons not to believe in them, because I've been to such places myself. And especially in southern Kazakhstan. When you find yourself in completely the space and time changes around you. Such changes in space, time and perception of the world in mythology are usually made by the so-called tricksters. These are not good or not evil beings, they are mischievous. According to popular beliefs, tricksters can be and travel through all three worlds at once, fully making fun of the representatives of each of them. Demons, tricksters, all kinds of rascals, simply those who deceive others. All this comes from the ancient dream of primitive man, from the understanding that the soul can separate from the body. It is curious that tricksters deceived everyone not pursuing any goal. They did it just because they could. Loki from the Scandinavians, Set from the Egyptians, Hermes from the Greeks, Alda Corsair and Girencher from the Kazakhs. Typically, tricksters, according to some sources, they are some kind of jinns. To the other, the gods of the middle category, which can turn into foxes or coyotes. Shamans consider such creatures as the strongest totem and conductor to other worlds. If a shaman has enough power, he can tame such spirits and make them become assistants. This happens not when a person chooses a spirit, but when the spirit chooses one or another person. So the spirit looks into this person. If a person does not show any form of fear, the spirit shows interest to this person and begins to open certain roads before this person. When a person is being healed, Bakshi calls the spirits of the grass, the sun spirits, the spirits of the sky, the spirits of the earth, so that they help him in the treatment of this person. They must exorcise the spirit of this disease. There are spirits of disease, and in fact, there is a magnificent phrase. In fact, a man himself causes the spirit of the disease. Because if a person lives in harmony with himself, with the surrounding space, the spirit of illness simply will not come, and he cannot cause any damage to such person either. The spirit of sickness comes under certain circumstances. And when a person is lying sick, he always has the right to choose. He can lie and engage in self-pity. He can say, "Poor me, I'm so sick, I cannot be healed." And another person can wonder, why did this reality send me this disease? Why did the spirit of illness come to me? Where there is the weak spot through which the spirit of disease, this sholbos, why he came to me and how he corrodes me from within. In the modern world, such auto-training is actively used by psychologists. In their opinion, each person carries hidden and untapped resources which are in the subconscious and can move to consciousness through certain actions. For example, if you always say that everything is bad, it really will be so. And vice versa. It turns out that shamans carried practically psychological help to people. They worked not only with the patient's body but also with his mind, purifying and eliminating negative thoughts and fears. And as they say, the shamans always had enough work. Fear is one of the strongest and fastest growing emotions. In Kazakh mythology, there is one creature called Obear. Very few people remember about it, maybe our grandparents do, although in fact we hear about it quite often, however, under a different name. There is another character, Obear. Obear that devours people. This is also an incomprehensible creature. It is not anthropomorphic. Obear can take a variety of forms. It is just Obear. There is an analog, of course, it remained in the Russian language, Upir or vampire. That is a ghoul, a vampire. He is also called vampire in European culture. Do you hear it? This linguistic analogy, Obear, Upir and vampire. That's certainly the influence of this migration of cultural ideas through Europe, through Germany, which has been mixed and settled in Europe. Obear, ghoul or vampire is present in the mythology of peoples living on the entire Eurasian continent. According to the beliefs, a person who died from drunkenness or suicide could become a ghoul or vampire. Often wizards became Obears. It was believed that the earth does not accept such deceased, and they are forced to wander around the world and suck blood or internal energy from people. The best way to kill a ghoul is to stab him with an aspen stake in his chest. You can also pour ash on his grave or cut the tendons of his legs during the burial and insert a stone into his mouth. Without such rituals, people expose themselves to the danger of becoming a victim of ghouls, and in consequence, they could also become Obears. Also, according to other sources, ghouls or vampires were eating human energy, sending disease on them. A perfectly healthy and strong person could, in a matter of days, turn into a weak and feeble. Then this patient was carried to a shaman or bakshi. Many scientists and researchers are interested why there are such a huge number of terrible stories and evil beings in mythology. There are several explanations for this. The simplest thing is to intimidate a child so that he does not walk far away from home and does not become a prey to a wild beast. The other is more sacred. For example, some people were faced with some kind of situation. For example, a war, a famine, or something else. For example, there were some great victories. At first it is, of course, stored in memory, in real living memory. Then slowly it goes away and partly becomes a part of the unconscious. But in the unconscious, these are the images that appear in addition to living. They are filled with some kind of history, which is based on the previous history and so on. And thus, these ideas are formed, and they're important for the whole people, or for a whole family. In the mythology of many peoples, there are beings who helped people. However, they did not immediately become such patrons. It took a lot of time for this. One of the most striking examples is the famous nymphs, the girls who are the protectors of nature. Muses, nymphs, fairies. They have different names. In Turkic mythology, they are called peri. They came to us from Iranian mythology. It is curious that at the very beginning, there were rival creatures capable of turning into either girls or beasts. Later, the attitude towards them changed. Peri became kind, they fought with evil spirits, and when they appeared, the area would become full of floral scent. According to philologists, this word peri comes from the ancient Avestan parika, and it can be translated as witch. These creatures were popular not only in mythology. Even the classics of world literature use their images. Perhaps you never thought about it, but the character of Pushkin's Tale of Tsar Sultan, the Swan Princess, is a real peri. Pushkin describes how the Tsarevich rescued the swan from the claws of the vulture, and in consequence, the white bird turned into a beautiful girl who became the faithful companion of the prince. In general, there are lots of similar stories where the hero saves his future wife, as well as ways to destroy the evil character, whether it's a dragon or a sorcerer. As you know, in fairy tales, you cannot just kill a negative character. Often the protagonist had to go through a whole quest to achieve this goal. Shamans also have their own ways of conquering various spirits and creatures. When you meet a demon, a shoulders, you can call them whatever you like. And if somehow, by a fraudulent way, by peaceful means I discover the name of this spirit, I get power over it, if you understand what I mean. And to control this spirit, to evict it, to instill in shaman arrows, or for example, there is an element kuzungu, by means of which the spirit is withdrawn from the body, and then it resettles in here and then. Spruce. There is a beautiful spruce growing in my yard. Another way to deceive the spirit and thereby subordinate it to yourself is the tradition associated with the person's name. The Kazakhs still have such a tradition. The first real name which was whispered to the child's ear at birth, it is never pronounced. No one knows about it, and the child is called all sorts of affectionate names. Because if an evil spirit recognizes the true name of a child, it can harm him. Strange men who came to the boy and committed various mysterious rituals over him left. The child recovered, the life of the family returned to the usual course. Skeptics will say that this is the result of drugs and prolonged rest of the child. And those who believe in the existence of other worlds will understand that the shaman was able to defeat and drive away the evil Baduk who wanted to steal the boy's soul. We have the myth that everything can be explained rationally. As a scientist, I tell you that it is impossible, especially for a wide audience. What we call mythology is a very large and diverse set of representations, historical information, superstitions, fantasies that we inherited from our ancestors. Also, we have such a thing as the mythological thinking. It is present in our ordinary life. But if we hear a myth or we meet some supernatural phenomena, this feeling, it wakes up immediately. Therefore, mythology is a very ancient thing, an ancient part of our consciousness. We tend to respond to all this with resilience. Undoubtedly, the sacred property of the people is kept in myths and legends. Thanks to them, we can understand how our ancestors treated other cultures, peoples, beliefs. How did they understand the surrounding world? My name is Andrei Slozhin. Was the time puzzle? See you.